My mother convinced my boyfriend to marry my sister. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "She's stronger and better for you," as if I were the weakest link in my own life. When I found out, something inside me broke so cleanly, it felt like silence. So I left Boston, my family, the ruins of who I used to be, and I built a life from nothing. Years later, at the grand party I hosted in Seattle, my family walked through my doors smiling, but when they saw my husband, their faces turned pale, and the story truly began. I grew up in a house that looked perfect, from the street white pillars, trimmed hedges, windows that glowed warm at night, but inside everything felt staged, like we were performing a version of family life that only existed for the neighbors. My mother, Linda, curated that illusion the way some people curated museum exhibits. Scarlett, my older sister, was the centerpiece. I was the quiet shadow in the corner. Scarlett didn't even try to shine. She just existed, and everyone else made room for her. Teachers adored her. Relatives complimented her. My mother practically revolved her life around her. "She just has presence," she'd say, brushing Scarlett's hair with this proud, theatrical smile. Then she'd glance at me, hair pulled back, wearing jeans, usually holding a book, and the smile would fade. "Willow's smart," my dad would offer weakly. Linda would sigh. "Yes, but people don't remember smart." I used to pretend her words didn't stick. They did, every single one. I found refuge in screens and lines of code. Programming made sense. It didn't play favorites. If you made a mistake, the system told you. If you fixed it, it worked. At home, nothing worked, no matter how hard I tried. Then came Ethan. I met him in a student workspace during my junior year. He laughed easily, talked softly, and listened like what I said mattered. For a girl who grew up learning to take up as little emotional space as possible, it felt like sunlight after years of winter. He appreciated things my family never noticed: how I organized my notes, how I thought through problems, how I moved quietly, but with purpose. When I introduced him to my family, my father shook his hand warmly. Scarlett smiled politely. My mother's eyes, though, flickered with an interest I didn't understand at the time. Not in Ethan as a person, no. In what Ethan represented: ambition, potential, a future that could be shaped. "It's nice to have someone steady," Linda said later, stirring her tea. "Maybe he'll bring you out of that tech cave you live in." It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. I ignored the shift at first. I ignored the way Scarlett dressed up a little more when Ethan visited. I ignored Linda pulling him aside to ask about his goals, his plans, his vision. I even ignored the first time Ethan mentioned my sister, in a tone that felt warmer than necessary. Because for once, I wanted a chapter of my life to go right. But deep down, something in me already knew this family never let anything of mine stay mine for long. I didn't realize when things truly began to shift. Maybe it was the day Ethan started showing up late to our study sessions with vague excuses. Maybe it was when he began checking his phone more than flipping it over whenever I walked into the room. Or maybe it was the morning he mentioned my mother's cooking, like he'd been eating at our house more often than I knew. "Your mom makes incredible lemon chicken," he said casually. I froze. "You saw my parents this week?" He blinked slowly, as if searching his memory. "Oh yeah, your mom invited me over, just to talk. Just to talk." My mom had barely asked me about my classes in months, but she had time to chat with my boyfriend. The first ember of dread lit in my stomach. It grew when I found a receipt in his car gas from a station in Boston. He told me he'd been in New York that day. I held the receipt between my fingers, the paper warm from the sun, and every instinct in me screamed that something was wrong. When I asked him about it later, he smiled stiffly. "Your mom needed help with something. She said you were busy. I didn't think it was a big deal." Busy. That was her favorite word to justify pushing me aside. "She said Scarlett's been struggling," he added gently. "She could use support." Support. He said it with softness, like Scarlett was fragile glass and I was a hammer. One weekend, I decided to drive home unannounced. I told Ethan I was staying in my dorm to finish a project. I needed clarity. I needed truth. I walked into my parents' house at 9 p.m. The living room lights were on. Voices carried soft, familiar, intimate. I stopped in the hallway. Scarlett's laugh. Ethan's voice. My mother's low, pleased hum. I leaned against the wall and peeked around the corner. There they were, Scarlett sitting close enough for her knee to touch his. My mother perched in her armchair like a queen presiding over a coronation. Ethan sat between them, his face confused, conflicted, already half convinced of something he didn't know he'd agreed to. "She's stronger and better for you," my mother said, her voice honeyed. "Willow is distracted. She chooses her work over people." Scarlett understands connection. Scarlett lowered her lashes, performing innocence. "I just want you to be happy, Ethan." My heart cracked open quietly, cleanly. My mother continued, "Willow will build her career no matter what. But Scarlett, she needs someone like you. Someone successful, someone who fits. Like I was a puzzle piece she'd tried to sand down but still refused to snap into place. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He didn't even notice I was standing there watching my world bend sideways. My breath caught in my throat, and the truth burned hotter than betrayal. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan, and I was the only one who hadn't been in on it. I don't remember leaving the house. One moment I was staring at the living room, my mother orchestrating Scarlett, performing Ethan bending, and the next I was in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. Boston's night air pressed cold against the windows, but inside, everything felt overheated, suffocating. I didn't drive back to campus. I drove until the city thinned out, until highway lights blurred into streaks. When I finally pulled into a rest stop, the adrenaline evaporated, and the grief hit sharp, humiliating total. My mother hadn't just interfered. She'd replaced me. And Ethan, all he did was sit there and let her. I called the only person I trusted. "Riley, I need help." She didn't ask why. "I'm coming." Within hours, I was back in my dorm packing a small bag while Riley watched quietly from the doorway. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady. "You need to get out of here for a while. Not just this dorm, this whole orbit." She was right. I withdrew from my final semester 2 days later. Professors were shocked. Advisors pushed me to reconsider. But the truth was simple. I couldn't breathe in Boston anymore. The betrayal didn't just break my heart. It broke the illusion I'd clung to my whole life. That if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, proved myself enough, my family would eventually see me. Instead, they'd shown me exactly who they were. I packed what I could, sold what I couldn't. Then I left, moving across the country with one checked suitcase and no plan other than escape. Seattle felt like a foreign planet at first. The air smelled of rain and cedar. People didn't know my mother. They didn't know Scarlett. They didn't know that the girl ordering coffee with trembling hands had just watched her life implode. Riley's cousin let me crash in her small apartment for a few weeks. I remember lying awake on that fold-out couch, hearing the refrigerator hum, feeling the weight of failure pressing into my ribs. But pain is strange. It breaks you open in ways that make space for something new. On a quiet morning after days of barely functioning, I stood at the window and saw the sun hitting the lake. Something in me, something small but stubborn, whispered, "Get up." So I did. I found a therapist, Dr. Linden, who didn't accept my polite, "I'm fine." She pushed until the truth spilled out, messy and raw. "You weren't chosen," she said once, "because your family didn't want to see your worth. That's not your failure." I applied to finish my degree in Seattle. Then I built a new life, one piece at a time, jobs, routines, friendships, stability. My world didn't rebuild quickly, but it rebuilt honestly. And slowly, anger became clarity. Clarity became strength. And strength became something dangerously close to peace. But peace didn't last. Because years later, when my father sent a quiet text about wanting to visit, everything I'd left behind began making its way back toward me. They arrived on a gray Seattle afternoon, my mother first stepping out of the car like she owned the driveway, Scarlett behind her with sunglasses too big for her face, and Ethan, slower, hesitant, looking everywhere but at me. My father emerged thinner than the last time I'd seen him. His shoulders rounded, his eyes searching for mine. Michael stayed beside me at the doorway, steady and warm in a way that made my mother's expression flicker. I saw it, the tiny flash of recalibration. She hadn't expected him, hadn't expected this version of me. "Willow," she said with a smile that matched the tone she used on neighbors she secretly judged. My, you've built quite the life," as if she hadn't destroyed the first one. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Inside the house, our house. My mother's eyes swept across the vaulted ceilings, the lake view, the clean lines and warm wood tones. My living room was controlled intentional, and for the first time in my life, I had home field advantage. We sat for dinner, my father, quiet Scarlet, glancing around with thinly veiled envy, Ethan shrinking into his chair every time Michael spoke. My mother, of course, narrated the room like she was leading a tour, and then Michael asked the one question that cracked the surface. So he said calmly, "When was the last time all of you were in the same room together?" My mother straightened. "The engagement party, of course." My stomach tightened. Scarlet stiffened. Ethan took a large sip of water, nearly choking on it. Michael nodded, perfectly polite. That must have been difficult for Willow. The room stilled. My mother's smile thinned. Well, Willow wasn't emotionally prepared for that season of life. A season of life. Not betrayal, not manipulation. A season. I opened my mouth, but Scarlet beat me to it. "Mom, stop," she said quietly. My mother's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me." Scarlet set down her fork. Her hands trembled slightly. "We're not doing this. Not here." My mother's voice lowered. "Scarlet, no." Scarlet insisted louder this time. "You need to hear this." And then, impossibly, like watching a dam crack open, years of secrets spilled into the open. "Willow deserves the truth," she said. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Scarlet looked at me, really looked, and for a moment she wasn't the golden child, the chosen one, the polished perfection. She looked tired, sad, human. Mom didn't just talk to Ethan, she began. She called him, repeatedly, told him you were distracted, too ambitious, that you weren't serious about your future with him. My stomach dropped. She also told him you were talking to someone else at school, Scarlet whispered, that you were planning to leave him. My voice cracked. "I know," she said quickly. "I know you didn't." Ethan's face went red. "Scarlet." She held up a hand. "I'm not finished." My mother's jaw clenched. "Scarlet Heart, you will stop this right now." "No," Linda Michael said evenly. "She won't." The icy silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever seen my mother confronted with. She turned her fury on Michael, but he didn't flinch. Not once. Scarlet pressed on. "Mom even drafted messages on your old device," she confessed. "She had me send them so they look like they came from you." I stared at her. "You sent them?" Tears filled her eyes. I was stupid. I believed her when she said you'd be fine, that you didn't need him, that I needed him more. Michael reached for my hand under the table. His grip was grounding real. "And Ethan?" I asked hoarsely. He finally looked up. His eyes were glassy, ashamed. "I was wrong," he said. "I trusted the wrong people. I should have talked to you. I should have fought for us. Instead, I let your mother decide what our future was." My father, silent until now, set his glass down with a trembling hand. "Linda," he whispered, "is this true?" My mother exhaled sharply. "I protected my daughters. I did what any mother would do." "No," I said quietly. "You did what served your image, what made Scarlet look better, what kept me small." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Scarlet wiped her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Willow, I really am. And it's not just that." Ethan lowered his eyes again. My mother's face went rigid. Scarlet continued. "Mom told Ethan his career would be stronger with someone more polished, more useful for networking. Useful. Networking. Like I was a resume and she was editing me out." My father looked gutted. "Linda, how could you?" But before she could answer, Michael pushed his chair back slightly, leaning forward with a calmness that somehow made him more formidable. "What you did," he said to Linda, "was abuse, emotional manipulation. You didn't just sabotage her relationship, you sabotaged her future because it didn't fit your narrative." My mother's voice trembled with indignation. "I won't be lectured in my daughter's home." "No," I said softly. "You won't. You'll listen." The room felt electric. I looked at all of them, my parents, my sister, my ex. people who had once been the center of my life, people who dismantled it piece by piece. "You cost me years," I said. "You cost me stability, my final semester, my confidence. You told me I wasn't worth choosing, but I built myself back. Without you." My mother scoffed, but it was weak defensive. "You left us," she said. "No," I replied. "You pushed me out." The room stayed frozen until my father spoke, voice raw. "Willow, I am so sorry. I knew things were wrong. I didn't stop it. That's my failure, not yours." For the first time in decades, he looked directly at my mother. "This ends," he said softly but firmly. "Today." Linda's expression faltered, shocked that the man who always stayed silent had finally taken a side. Michael stood, then walking to my side. His presence alone was a declaration. When they saw my husband, their faces turned pale, I said, looking at each of them. "This is why. Not because of who he is, but because he represents the life I built without you. One you couldn't control." Scarlett let out a quiet sob. Ethan stared at the floor. My mother grabbed her purse. "We're leaving." But my father didn't move. "I'm staying," he said. "Willow and we have things to mend." My mother stared at him stunned. Then she walked out. Scarlett followed slowly, but before she left, she turned back to me. "I'm done letting her control me," she whispered. "I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Ethan approached last. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "and I'll spend years being sorry, but I'm glad you found someone who sees you." Then he too walked out. The door closed. Silence. Michael squeezed my hand. "You okay?" And for the first time in years, I was. In the days after that confrontation, the house felt strangely quiet, like years of noise had finally drained out. My father stayed with us for the rest of the week. We took slow walks by the lake, sat on the balcony in the evenings, and talked in a way we never had before. No pretending, no tiptoeing around my mother's moods, just honesty, fragile but real. One morning, while the light hit the water in soft gold, he said, "I spent so long trying not to make waves that I forgot how to protect the people who needed me most." His voice carried regret, not shame. "I can't change the past, Willow, but I want to spend whatever time I have left being your dad." I reached for his hand. That's all I ever wanted. We stayed connected after he returned to Boston, weekly calls, hospital updates, quiet conversations that felt like repairing old bridges. When he passed months later, I flew back for the funeral. Scarlett stood beside me. She'd left Ethan, moved into a small apartment, and found a job on her own. Nothing glamorous, but entirely hers. For the first time, she looked like someone choosing her life instead of performing it. "Thanks for giving me another chance," she whispered. "We're all rewriting old stories," I told her. "You get to write yours, too." My mother remained distant, polite, in a brittle way, reduced to the perimeter of my life where she could no longer wound me. And that boundary alone felt like victory. Back in Seattle, with Michael's hand in mine and a life built from my own strength, I understood something simple and profound. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I healed. When I look back now, I don't think about the betrayal. I think about the rebuilding. I think about the woman I became once I stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing myself. My mother's schemes didn't break me. They revealed me, and the life I have today proves it. If you've ever survived family betrayal or had to rebuild from nothing, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be.